Yeah, I am going to change it because Deepak was not there. I'll blame it on him and then take.
So should I start? Okay. All right.
Ma'am, 10:30, we'll just start.
So tell me when, should I start or not?
Just 30 seconds, ma'am.
30 seconds, okay.
Please live, ma'am.
A very warm welcome to one and all across time zones who are connected to the session. I'm Seema Khanna, Deputy Director General NIC, and I'll be your host. RAISE 2020 aims to highlight India's vision and the potential roadmap of using AI and aligns our focus on artificial intelligence and its potential to vastly change the way humans interact with the digital world. And as far as I can see, its impact is only likely to grow further. We need to broaden our vision to embrace AI. In addition to cutting-edge technology, it's equally important to align the thinking of the in-house talent, the company's culture, structure, and the ways of working to support the broad AI adoption. And for businesses and organizations that aren't born digital, traditional mindsets and ways of working run counter to those needed for AI. The topic for this session is building skills for an AI-ready task force. And joining us today are speakers who are very rich and represent both industry and academia. I am super impressed by their CVs, and I'm sure I'm going to be super impressed with their discussion points also. They're entrepreneurs and continue to be leaders and are driving the change in this very intense field. Let's start today's session with the keynote speaker, Ms. Laura Longcore. She also has a very impressive resume. She's VP Microsoft Services. She's a leader in business transformation with over 25 years experience developing high impact teams that deliver business solutions to customers. She's currently focusing on helping enterprise businesses achieve game-changing results through cloud platforms, cloud productivity, modern business applications, and mobility solutions, and believes that learning can be a critical differentiator for every business. Let's hear from Mrs. Laura Longcore.
Customer perspective, we're looking to help identify deeper relationships and take in data around the customer signal and what customer needs are all about so that we can drive digital transformation most effectively there. Optimizing operations is top of mind for almost every one of our customers these days, as we're looking for ways to save money, get more efficient, and leverage the operational data that we have to change the way our business models are run. And last but not least is really around innovation and helping our customers either create new products or expand on the products that they already have by leveraging product telemetry. At the heart of these 4 pillars for digital transformation is the intelligent platform. And that's really where it all comes together with Microsoft's platform around our cloud capabilities for Azure, our data platform capabilities, artificial intelligence, and also from a mobility perspective. And so when you take this digital transformation feedback loop and we feed that all into the intelligent platform, that is our way of looking at how we can help our customers have a platform available to them to reach their business objectives, to really start looking at how we can break out of this economic crisis that we're seeing and think about new business models, new opportunities, and getting innovative again so that we can get back to where we were prior to the COVID pandemic and be able to push forward more effectively with digital transformation. Now, in order to do that, we also talk a lot at Microsoft about tech intensity, and that really has three main areas to it. First, it's about driving technical adoption. So in order to leverage that intelligent platform that I just talked about, we also need to be adopting the intelligent platform and making sure that we're using it within our organizations every day. We also need technical capability, and I'm going to spend the bulk of my time really focused on that because that's really all about skilling and how we can make sure that we have AI-ready workforce available. And then the last area is certainly critically important, and that is trust. Trust needs to be built into this intelligent platform. It needs to be built into all the ways that we can take digital transformation and the underlying technologies and capabilities, whether you're looking at data, looking at security, you're looking at privacy, all that is built into the trust equation. And so that's what we think about when we talk about technical intensity. But let me focus in a little bit more on tech capability. What I really wanted to talk about here was a methodology that we use with our customers day in and day out to be thinking about the overall structure of the capabilities that they will need to enable an AI-ready workforce. And you'll see some of this is not technical. If you look at the top around executive strategy and thinking about the culture you need to create to drive digital transformation. This is critically important to invest the time I'm Laura Longcore, and I'm the Vice President in the Worldwide Learning Organization at Microsoft. I am thrilled to be joining the RAISE 2020 event today to discuss building skills for an AI-ready workforce. I've been at Microsoft for over 20 years, and today's topic is really near and dear to my heart, as previous to my current role in Worldwide Learning, I was running the consulting practice globally for Microsoft for our data and artificial intelligence practice. So today we're combining two of my favorite topics around AI and around skilling. To begin with, I thought we should reflect on digital transformation. As we know, in today's world with the COVID pandemic and all the challenges we are seeing, not only from a health crisis perspective, but also from an economic crisis perspective, we are seeing an emerging trend happening across every single industry with the desire and the need to grow digital transformation. At Microsoft, we think about digital transformation and how we can help our customers be most effective at achieving their digital transformation goals by breaking it down into four main areas that we want to help customers with. To begin with, we look at empowering employees, and this is really helping employees within our customers' organizations be most effective by leveraging technology and data at their fingertips. From a customer perspective, we're looking to help identify deeper relationships and take in data around the customer signal and what customer needs are all about so that we can drive digital transformation most effectively there. Optimizing operations is top of mind for almost every one of our customers these days, as we're looking for ways to save money, get more efficient, and leverage the operational data that we have to change the way our business models are run. And last but not least is really around innovation and helping our customers either create new products or expand on the products that they already have by leveraging product telemetry. At the heart of these four pillars for digital transformation is the intelligent platform. And that's really where it all comes together with Microsoft's platform around our cloud capabilities for Azure, our data platform capabilities, artificial intelligence, and also from a mobility perspective. And so when you take this digital transformation feedback loop and we feed that all into the intelligent platform, that is our way of looking at how we can help our customers have a platform available to them to reach their business objectives, to really start looking at how we can break out of this economic crisis that we're seeing and think about new business models, new opportunities, and getting innovative again so that we can get back to where we were prior to the COVID pandemic and be able to push forward more effectively with digital transformation. Now, in order to do that, we also talk a lot at Microsoft about tech intensity, and that really has three main areas to it. First, it's about driving technical adoption. So in order to leverage that intelligent platform that I just talked about, we also need to be adopting the intelligent platform and making sure that we're using it within our organizations every day. We also need technical capability, and I'm going to spend the bulk of my time really focused on that because that's really all about skilling and how we can make sure that we have AI-ready workforce available. And then the last area is certainly critically important, and that is trust. Trust needs to be built into this intelligent platform. It needs to be built into all the ways that we can take digital transformation and the underlying technologies and capabilities, whether you're looking at data, looking at security, you're looking at privacy, all that is built into the trust equation. And so that's what we think about when we talk about technical intensity. But let me focus in a little bit more on tech capability. What I really wanted to talk about here was a methodology that we use with our customers day in and day out to be thinking about the overall structure of the capabilities that they will need to enable an AI-ready workforce. And you'll see some of this is not technical. If you look at the top around executive strategy and thinking about the culture you need to create to drive digital transformation. This is critically important to invest the time, invest the thought processes across the organization to really be thinking about what kind of culture and what kind of strategy do you need to be driving. Will you be focusing more internally in your organization and helping empower your employees? Are you looking for new business opportunities to innovate and create new products and new opportunities to engage with your customers? Or maybe you're focusing first on optimizing operations because that's a way to drive cost savings. All of that comes into your executive strategy and how you're thinking about that. But culture is equally important. We see a lot of demand on the learnings that Microsoft itself has gone through around our learning culture and how we have evolved over time to really make sure that we are much more focused on learning, experimenting, and driving a culture that is not afraid to fail and try new things. And that has been a journey that we've been on internally, and I know many of our customers are looking at the journey that they need to be driving as well. So at that top level, executive strategy and culture really sets the stage. And then as you get further down, you can look in the middle of the screen. Basically, this is all around technical capabilities. So if you think about the technical capabilities that are really necessary to drive AI effectively, at the bottom are the fundamentals. Intelligent cloud and data platform. You really cannot have a strong artificial intelligence application without thinking through your data platform approach as well. And so those two are critically important to the foundation of building your AI-ready capabilities. But then there's also applications and intelligent services and IoT to be thinking of as well, depending on the particular solution that may be relevant for you in your industry or in the way that you are trying to apply artificial intelligence. I also want to call out the two pillars on the side that are equally important around governance and thinking through things like security and privacy. And also on the operations side, how will you keep your artificial intelligence applications up and running and be making sure that you are looking at your data in ways that never goes stale and never has biases built into it. So all of these capabilities are really required to enable the AI-ready workforce. And I don't want to go into too much depth, but I did think it's really important to go one click down into the level of details behind each of these areas. This could be a little overwhelming, but what I would tell you is not all of these capabilities need to be developed at once. This is an iterative process. You can start small. You can start thinking about what one particular application you want to go build and what would be those learning and skilling capabilities that are required underneath that to go drive that. So if you are looking at building a virtual agent, for example, you may need to definitely look at your intelligent cloud capabilities, your data platform capabilities, and then really focus in on the virtual agent side. And maybe you could ignore the rest of these capabilities for that particular application. But over time, these capabilities are the ones that are going to be critically important to at least be having some discussion on in your organization. And again, I can't underline and underscore the importance to be thinking about everything from the strategy, the governance capability, things like ethics and compliance and identity and threat protection. All of these need to come into play as capability development within your organizations as well. And then on the operations side, really thinking about how you're ongoing supporting and running your applications. DevOps is a great example where I was talking about making sure that you are keeping your data fresh, you are continuing to test your data, you're making sure that your data has the right level of privacy, your data has the right level of checks and balances so that you're making sure that that all of your applications are running most effectively. So these are really the underlying capabilities that we think are required for running an AI-ready workforce. Now, what I wanted to do next is really just talk about some of the capabilities and the programs that we have available in Microsoft that can be leveraged across your organizations as well. We have a number of assets and resources here. And anything that is underlined in blue, there is a link directly to. We will make sure that we have these slides available for you. And you can go check out these resources on your own. But I really wanted to talk about how we think about helping the entire ecosystem from within Microsoft and skilling our own employees to how we skill our customers, our partners, and then also future generations, what we call future generations. And this is really intended to build the skills today to make sure that we're ready for tomorrow and we're ready for those opportunities to go be much more resilient, drive our digital transformations with our customers. So if I start with skilling our employees, one of the very first things that we all focus on at Microsoft is making sure we are providing responsible artificial intelligence. So we have trainings that are available within our organization that cover our AI ethical principles. And these are the principles that we have decided for all of our AI capabilities that we will focus on, whether they're built into our products and they're readily available right into the technology products that we provide today, or whether they are built into technologies in the way we do business. So our principles cut across fairness, inclusiveness, reliability and safety, transparency, privacy, security, and accountability. And we skill our own employees on those principles so they know how to build our products most effectively so we can have that trust that I talked about earlier around tech intensity. We also provide skilling for our own employees around digital transformation itself and the industry expertise that goes along with it. It's really important to understand the business context of the technology solutions that Microsoft is providing. And the only way to do that is to make sure we're staying fresh and up to speed on what is happening in the industry and what scenarios are most relevant for leveraging digital transformation and that intelligent platform capability. And then, of course, we have technical skilling. It's really to help all the folks in our organization, whether they are engineers in our product teams, they're consultants working with our largest customers, or even our technical sellers, to be prepared to be able to engage with our customers most effectively. They have to stay up to date on the latest technical skilling. So we provide ongoing skilling, learning roadmaps and certifications that every one of our employees can be taking advantage of and making sure that they are staying skilled. And this is really how we are applying our own tech intensity within Microsoft. When I think about what we're doing for the ecosystem as it relates to our customers and partners, there's a number of areas that we're focused on as well. We have the AI Business School, which provides 6 learning paths. This is really intended for CXO levels to be driving that executive strategy that I talked about around artificial intelligence and digital transformation efforts. So the learning paths are around the strategy, the culture, responsible AI, scaling AI, and then AI for both business users and technical users. So that's another resource that we make available to our customers and partners. We also have the AI School on MS Learn. MS Learn is our learning platform at Microsoft. It is the one place, if you go to Microsoft.com and you want to learn about any of our technologies, any of our capabilities, MS Learn is the place to do that. And the AI School is very specific to an online learning path that's self-paced, and it's around several of our more technical capabilities around conversational AI, so being able to build bots and that type of conversational capability, machine learning, so you can predict things, AI services, our autonomous systems, as well as responsible AI. Again, you see the importance that we reinforce that not only with our within our own company, but with our customers as well around responsible AI. We also have the Enterprise Skilling Initiative, which is targeted towards our enterprise businesses. And this is instructor-led training that's delivered digitally. And the real focus here is around driving learnings for cloud, AI, data, and there's separate learning paths and certifications that enterprises are enabled to reach out and take advantage of through our Enterprise Skill Initiative. Last, under customers and partners, I'd call out our AI Labs, which is a hands-on experience to really experiment and learn how AI is being used in the world today. So that's covering some of the resources we've got available from a customer and partner. And it doesn't really matter what your industry is. This particular pillar of resources is available, and it can be customized and tailored for your learning needs in those particular areas. The last area that I cover is what we refer to as future generations. And this is really about helping people that are job seekers, whether they're students today or maybe they're even unemployed due to COVID. We have several different programs that we are implementing and have out in the marketplace today. The first is what we call the Global Skilling Initiative. This is specific to COVID. We have an ambition around the world to skill 25 million job seekers that have been impacted and move them into most on-demand roles. And we have free learning paths. We have the ability to have skilling resources, as well as deep discounts on certifications as well for the Global Skilling Initiative. For our students, we really are focusing on Microsoft Learn content. So again, I was referring to Microsoft Learn off of the Microsoft.com site. And here we've got targeted learning paths for students and educators, and it really is academic ready cloud curriculum. So that's our focus on helping with future generations from a higher ed perspective. And then last but certainly not least, I wanted to talk about our AI for Good initiatives. And this is really how we are looking at societal impact and how we are empowering those that are working to solve humanitarian issues and create a more sustainable world. So we have AI for Good for the Earth, which is our sustainability initiatives that leverage artificial intelligence. We have AI for Good that's focused on healthcare for accessibility. And so that gives you a flavor of a couple of the areas that we're focusing on from a societal impact. So there's no shortage of resources, programs available in helping to build your AI digital skills. And we like to think about this as a complete ecosystem. And we're every day looking at ways that we can continue to build out and enable this ecosystem for the future. So with that, I would just leave you with one thought. Invest in yourself. Commit yourself to lifelong learning. It really is the most valuable asset you'll ever have. And when we think about enabling the AI workforce, I hope I gave you a few ideas today that you could leverage within your organization, and you can apply to your type of growth and skilling as well. So thank you again, and enjoy the rest of the sessions.
Seema, you're on mute.
Ma'am, you are on mute.
I apologize for this. I really apologize for this. So I just will restart. I'm really grateful to Mrs. Longcore for a very brilliant address. And I really like the way her presentation blended in all the elements of technology, e-governance, and of course, the associated skill set required to run this framework. She touched upon all the key elements of strategy, inclusivity, reliability, security, which ultimately leads to digital transformation. So now let's move to the next session, which is a panel discussion, which promises to be extremely interesting with the very brilliant panelists that we have on board. In today's world, staying relevant has become very difficult, both for humans and the business they represent. Businesses are struggling with numerous variables to determine what their stance should be regarding artificial intelligence. The business opportunities are exceptionally promising, and not acting on them for a business house could be a potential disaster. Most organizations are aware of the challenge and are also sensitized enough to know that they need to rethink their lines of business, training their staff, data scientists, developers, and work on defining an AI strategy. I come from an operational background, and I need to even address issues like my infrastructure. I'm going to use my in-house cloud. I'm going to buy a new hardware, because at the end of the day, AI pumps in a lot of data. It needs a lot of lumber crunching to be done. So I think these are going to be very, very critical aspects that are going to be part of the discussion. So before we move on, I would like to introduce the moderator of this session, which is Ms. Kirti. She also comes from a very brilliant background. She is a leader of Futureskills at NASSCOM, a business professional with rich experience in entrepreneurship, management, and leadership. Her last assignment was with NIIT, where she was working as CEO of NIPE, the NIIT and Genpact joint venture, and has also led the global consulting and advisory team. Her past experience of being an entrepreneur helps her guide, and her financial background helped her to provide a holistic perspective to every solution that she offers to clients. Kirti, over to you, please. My one request, we have a 60-minute session, so if you could just kind of manage the timelines there, that would be great. Thank you.
I will do it, Seema. Thank you. It's wonderful to be here with this great panel, and I'll introduce them before I actually set a little context to what we're going to talk about. So I'll start with Dr. Partha Chakraborty. So he is a professor of computer science and engineering and the former director of the prestigious IIT Kharagpur. He's been working in the area of AI and applications for the last 4 decades, and with numerous research publications and dozens of industry collaborations. He now leads the major AI-related projects at a national level, including the National Digital Library of India and the National AI Resource Platform around building an AI workforce, platforms, and tools for AI and enabling research on it. So welcome, Partha. My next panelist is Dr. Rohini Srivathsa. She's the National Technology Officer for Microsoft in India and is responsible for helping Microsoft's customers and partners across industry and government drive innovation and growth through tech intensity. We just had this lovely equation from Laura of tech intensity equal to tech adoption and tech capability. I love that. She's a member of the Wiley Innovation Advisory Council, is on the advisory council of the ECE department at Carnegie Mellon, and serves on the Scientific Advisory Committee for NMICPS, Department of Science and Technology, Government of India. She was recognized among the top 10 most influential analytics leaders in India in 2019 by Analytics India magazine. Great to have you with us, Rohini. Welcome. Shweta Khurana is my next panelist. Shweta looks after partnerships and initiatives from Asia Pacific and Japan. Her current focus is to drive Intel's global 2030 commitment to make technology fully inclusive and empower 30 million people with AI skills for current and future jobs. Seeing the scale of the problem, I guess you're doing a great job, Shweta. She's driving many initiatives as creating AI curriculum for youth in classes 8 to 10 in partnership with CBSC Ministry of Education, to launching responsible AI for youth for state government schools in partnership with NEGD Ministry of IT. Nice to have you with us, Shweta. And my last panelist is Dr. Deepak Garg. He's the director of leadingindia.ai, the director at NVIDIA Bennett Center for Research and Artificial Intelligence, and the chair, Computer Science and Engineering, Bennett University. He's leading the largest development, skilling, and research initiative in AI in India with more than 1,000 institutional collaborators. He's certified in video analytics and reinforcement learning. He's a chief consultant for algorithmguru.com. He's a blogger in Times of India named as Breaking Shackles. So great to have you with us. Deepak, yes, I see you.
Thank you.
So before I ask my panelists to tell us how to build an AI-ready workforce, I thought in true MBA fashion, I should size the problem before talking about its solution. Last year, MeitY published a report on India's $1 trillion digital opportunity, of which 500 to 600 billion is expected to fructify through AI-based solutions and business models. And it's with that opportunity in mind that the government has launched many, many initiatives to bring about digital transformation in the country. And this conference is perhaps is one of them. And a fun fact, did you know that there are about 100,000 registrations for this event? There are many miles to go before we can grab this opportunity though. And there is the biggest challenge is perhaps the availability of talent. NASSCOM has just released a report along with Zinnov trying to quantify the talent demand and supply gap. We have about 8 million students entering the university system every year. 2 million of them sign up for STEM courses. About 220,000 odd go for IT job roles, and about 45 to 50,000 are equipped to handle digital roles. We all heard about Laura talking about all the various technologies that go into providing solutions in this with these emerging technologies. But the demand side is 350 to 400,000 people. So there's a huge gap already today. Companies are, of course, doing a lot to cover this gap. But as we go fast forward to 5 years, the supply, if nothing else changes, is going to be 60,000 people coming out of the university system, and the demand is going to shoot up to 1.2 million. It doesn't require too much maths to calculate the opportunity loss for that. And today, talent is no longer limited by geography. Talent is a competitive advantage for nations. If as a country, we want to make an impact, we have to get our act together and make sure we do it together with all hands on deck, because the problem is too large for people to do it individually. And that was the philosophy behind the Futureskills initiative at NASSCOM, where the IT industry came together to create a platform and ecosystem to make India the global hub of digital talent. Soon after that, the government thought this was a great idea, and why not leverage what the IT industry is doing for itself? And very soon, Futureskills Prime will be launched as a partnership between NASSCOM and METI, where we will provide credible content for all Indian citizens to build digital awareness, or what we call digital fluency, and also build the digital skills. Not everyone needs to learn how to code, but everyone, as managers, as leaders, as government officials, we all need to know what is AI, so that we can at least figure out what to do and what are the solutions out there. So it's in this context that my panel today has a brilliant set of speakers. Each one of them has addressed this issue, and they've done it at scale, and you will be amazed to hear all the things that are going on already. And as an outcome of this session, I hope we get many more people inspired to join the reskilling revolution after you hear what they have to say. So my first question is to Dr. Partha Chakraborty. So, sir, do you agree that while people need to understand AI technically, there is also a big need to build awareness? And is there a continuum of what people need to learn?
As you just mentioned, Kirti, first of all, thank you for inviting me to this panel. As you just mentioned, AI and different disciplines influence each other in a more permeative way than any other discipline. Because once AI begins to affect a discipline, that discipline begins to affect AI more than the AI affecting that discipline. So that is the dimension that brings a completely different perspective to creating AI workforce and creating skilling in AI. And in order to do that for India, we cannot start doing it by having only courses in academic institutions. So the first step for doing that, in my opinion, is use AI for AI. That means, like you have AI for all, it is the objective of skilling is to use AI for AI. So what we need to do is build platforms at scale, which can reach to everybody. And it is only through these platforms that we can really connect everybody else and merge the quality quantity spectrum into the progression that we want. So what we are doing is we are developing what is called the National AI Resource Platform, which you just mentioned. It is on the backdrop of the National Digital Library, which we have developed, which today contains 50 million content free for every Indian citizen, contributed by everybody all over the world. Now, in order to bring in technical depth and the discipline integration, what we feel is that we have to break up any such skilling or knowledge program into the core of the AI or the fundamentals, which includes the math, the algorithms, and everything else. Then comes the thematic areas, because AI starts affecting vision, language, every other area. Then comes the disciplines. So from psychology in AI to AI in psychology, from economics in AI to AI in economics, from journalism in AI to AI in journalism. I'm not talking only of engineering. I'm not talking only of smart cities. I'm talking of its permeating capability in everything else. And as soon as this permeation comes, at the edge of these disciplines comes new knowledge. And it is at the edge of these disciplines when new knowledge will emerge. So we need to create platforms which provide people with the ability to walk through this platform, to gather knowledge from this platform, the ability to share knowledge on this platform, the ability to build new products on this platform, and the ability to really go into your own pathways. So in addition to normal knowledge resources, we need data, because without data and without annotation of data, we will not be able to really do AI at all in many senses, though nowadays self-supervision and newer methods of AI are coming, which are also very unique. The other thing that we need to provide access to is compute. Because for people in India, unless we provide compute to them, we are not going to make them learn and do things, because without doing, you're really not going to be able to do AI. Then we need to build assessments, recommendations and assessments. And here again, we have to use AI to really differentiate between the technical learning, the cognitive learning, the application learning, and the innovation learning. Finally, we need to really get people into the next mode of education. The way we were all taught is completely going to change. Therefore, from the school level, the whole of transdisciplinary experiential learning, where people work on virtual labs or labs that exist elsewhere, which I'm operating from here, and the whole feedback system to enable creativity and exploration. Such a platform has got 3 layers. We have already built the National Digital Library of Resources. Now we are building the AI learning platform. And next we will build the experiential learn from, where we really want to get people to experience it. And this platform has to scale. And this platform has to exist everywhere. So I believe that with the amount of effort that is required here, we all of us need to join hands and build this new system. It is only
Thanks.
then we in India will be able to move forward. So these
Yes,
are
I
my
think
first
that's,
thoughts.
yes, exactly. And thanks for the lovely framework that you've laid out of how to go from, the logic of how we go about it. And talking about platforms and talking about how we need to look at contributing, gathering, sharing. Rohini, I know that Microsoft has been doing a lot of work around this area. And so maybe I'll just ask you to step in and get your thoughts on how to build an AI-ready workforce at scale.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Thanks a lot for that context. Also, Professor Partha and Kirti for laying out the size of the problem. I think some of the comments that Laura made are important from a global Microsoft perspective, but I thought I might add an India perspective to it, because India is a different country, very different demographics, and we have our challenges and our opportunities in different ways. I think one of the somewhat seemingly contradictory statements which I'd like to make at the outset is AI is transformative, and Partha spoke about AI for marketing for AI for so that kind of transformation across sectors. And in fact, analogies have been drawn with electricity. And yesterday, and in the early opening day, Mukesh Ambani made an analogy with intelligent life itself, which is a pretty profound statement to make. And the other point I would make is that AI is less about technology, and it's really more about the culture and thinking about data and the ethics element of it. Therefore, what it has led for us, and Laura spoke about it as well, is that it has told us, it has asked us to take an ecosystem approach and a life cycle approach. And let me explain what I mean by those two terms, what I mean by ecosystem and what do I mean by life cycle. I think the ecosystem element draws to Partha's comment regarding how transformative and cross-domain impact AI will have. And if I make it real for the current context of COVID-19, there is a lot of unemployment. There's a lot of reskilling and issues that are happening in the workforce. So some of the work that we've been doing is to help job seekers across the world. And we've in fact taken a pledge to skill 25 million people around the world who have lost their jobs due to COVID by helping them through our combined assets of LinkedIn, GitHub, and Microsoft in helping them learn skills that they need for jobs that are out there. Because that connection we are able to establish. And in that context, in India, we have a partnership with National Skill Development Corporation, and we have been to skill more than 1 lakh youth in the country over the next 12 months with what I would call digital skills. They're not necessarily only AI skills, but they're really digital skills, which includes cloud, includes cybersecurity, includes use of basic digital platforms, right? Because that's needed. It's not everybody is going to be creating AI systems. And so therefore so the ecosystem part is to think about every stakeholder in the ecosystem and what kind of skills are they going to need in the new world, which is going to be more and more digital and data and AI driven, so to speak. In that same context of ecosystem, then I would go is to say the work that we are doing, for example, with NASSCOM Futureskills to skill 1 million students in AI by 2021 is about helping students in the undergrad world through workshops and assignments and work through introductory sessions and learn AI skilling as such, which is hardcore AI skilling. Then there is work with business leaders and decision makers, because only when business leaders and corporate, at the board level understand the implications of AI from a strategy perspective and as to what it means in terms of their leadership approach, is when AI can become real in the corporate and the business and even the government world. So a lot of the work that we are doing there is really business conversation. So we have partnership with, for example, Indian School of Business in Hyderabad to have a 3-day executive program that is all about leading business transformation with AI. It is very little about technology, but it's about helping the strategic conversation on AI. Similarly, we are working with government officials in terms of a digital governance tech tour to then help government officials around the country on AI and cloud. So the idea with the ecosystem approach is because AI is so pervasive and so transformative beyond technology world and is creating that tech intensity that Laura spoke about, you need to have an ecosystem approach. The second term I spoke about was life cycle, because life cycle means you need to train and skill children, students across their learning life cycle. And that then goes into the other element of saying, how do you make sure that even starting from K-12 education. So last year, for example, we had tied up with CBSE to train teachers into integrating AI into classroom training. So that then brings in ability to think about what AI can do. It will not be as technical, but it's also thinking about the capabilities and how they need to get ready for the future. Then if you go down into thinking about vocational, school education program. So for example, we are working with MHRD on government schools across the country who are talking about vocational training and how digital skills need to be part of it. Digital labs, which is Partha spoke about the fact that you don't need to have a physical lab, you can do things virtually and be able to run experiments. So similarly, we have an AI digital labs program that is working with institutions around the country to train students with access to infrastructure, frameworks, tools, techniques, and demos to really learn AI by hands-on experiences. Then if you go down the life cycle approach to say, you're dealing with students at the K-12 level, the college universities, now people who are already out there in the workforce, they need to get reskilled. And therefore for them, we run something called Week of AI, which has been a specially curated 5-day online program to help the developer community, both data science versus even the IT developers, so not necessarily data scientists, but actually AI engineers, leverage AI to bring intelligence into their programs. So I think that the thinking that we have had is a little bit nuanced, if I may put it that way, because it is not just one thing. Because of the transformative nature of AI, because it's going to impact every component of the ecosystem, you do need to take this ecosystem approach and a life cycle approach that is thinking through how a person's lifelong learning journey has to continue.
Thanks. And I think, all the stuff that you talked about, whether it's vocational training, whether it's schools, whether it's teacher training, whether it's leadership training, I think this just highlights the point that AI cannot be in the rarefied echelons of IT or engineering students anymore. It's got to become democratic. It's got to spread. And I suppose some people need to know how to build solutions for it, but yet others need to just understand. And I think leadership training was a great point that you brought out. I now actually, this is a perfect segue to go to Shweta, because I mean, based on what all she's been doing, I think there's some great stories that you can tell us, Shweta, about how this is actually happening.
Thanks, Kirti. A lot of people look at AI as futuristic, but on the other hand, when we look at social media algorithms, various chatbots around us, even in schools, we realize that we're already living in an AI-fueled world to quite an extent. AI is delivering transformational change. Both the speakers earlier have clearly called that out, both in business and society, and has a potential to boost profitability rates by a significant amount. And so a lot of discussions are happening on what are the new skills which are really required to build an AI-ready workforce. Now, it is without doubt that AI is bringing disruption across industries, and education is no different, of course. In fact, in the past few years, AI has gained so much of an importance that countries today are determined to get their country's current and future workforce ready for an AI world. And India's own strategy, AI for All, if we refer to that, mentions AI as an opportunity for inclusive economic growth. Focuses on skills-based education, value of project-related work, and if I may quote, effectively harness the potential of AI in a sustainable manner. So now the keywords the keywords here for us at Intel are inclusive, responsible, scalable, and sustainable. We've been working with CBSE over the last 15 months and have developed the AI curriculum framework with specific learning outcomes, which is currently being delivered in more than 5,000 schools. We also have a program called Responsible AI for Youth, which you had mentioned earlier, which is with NEGD, Ministry of IT. And in fact, the Honorable Prime Minister referred to the same program at the inaugural ceremony of RAISE itself. This is applicable for students studying in state government schools pan-India. So let me cite a few examples from there as outcomes. 2 students of grade 11 used computer vision and natural language processing to create a sign language translator that can convert sign language into text and help differently abled communicate in real time with people who don't know sign language. Or a young girl from grade 10 from a government-aided school creates a project called Happiness Guru to predict the onset of depression among school children using computer vision. And today she aspires to become an AI ethics lawyer. We see many such examples as evidence of impact because our model is based on 3 vectors: demystification, building, and demonstrating. And we are not just focusing on technology skills, that is learning Python or AI domains like statistical data, CV, NLP, but have an equal focus on core skills as awareness of AI ethics, inclusion, bias, privacy, critical thinking, computational thinking, problem solving, etc. And more importantly, power skills as growth mindset, design thinking, systems thinking, social emotional skills, entrepreneurial mindset. So the recipe possibly is technical skills, core skills, and power skills topped with a capstone and possibly even an apprenticeship. I'll just add to this that the time to develop future workforce is now. And as you rightly size the problem for all of us, the more organizations which are supporting public-private partnership programs with government, with the academia, the more is always better. And we've seen that with the relevant mindset, the right skill sets, access to AI tool sets. In fact, Professor Partha spoke about access to compute, which is so essential. We can really empower the future workforce to gain technical confidence. Confidence which will allow them to apply new technology skills to create value and stay relevant in the workplace. So Kirti, if I have to answer your question in 3 words on how does one become AI ready, it will possibly be a relevant mindset, the right skill sets, tech core and power, and access to AI tool sets. So mindset, skill sets, tool sets. Thank you very much.
Thanks. That was a lovely capping to what you said. What I'm noticing with everyone's is a common theme that we need to take an ecosystem approach. Many hands need to be on deck. We have to do this together. The problem is too large for one organization to do it on its own. Futureskills actually took that approach, and a lot of you actually, a lot of the industries actually working, taking that approach. But it's really good to know that it's happening in different pockets as well. And I think that's the perfect introduction to Deepak to talk about what he does, because I think he has also built this collaborative ecosystem approach to building AI skills. So over to you, Deepak.
So thank you, Kirti. Yeah, definitely. Uh, I will just take 2 minutes to explain what leadingindia.ai has done in last 2.5 years. So we started with the collaboration of Ministry of Education as well as NVIDIA, Amazon, University College London, and Royal Society of Engineering UK, along with Niti Aayog. So our target was to train 1 million students through the Train the Trainer program. So in last 2 years, we have crisscrossed the country and done around 300 workshops across the region and trained around 12,000 trainers across the country. And we have achieved our target of enabling 1 million students in different aspects of AI. And this was done specifically with collaborative partners of around 50 AI startups so that the ecosystem approach is definitely enabled, and also through internships, hackathons, workshops, and other tools that we used. So what I will like to bring on the table and the learnings that we had is one is that many students are not clear on the pathway. Like Partha also touched upon this, because they remain confused because so many technologies are on the horizon. So they are not able to differentiate between AI, data science, IoT, cloud, and edge computing. And sometimes they are not sure that which courses to choose. And if I go through this pathway, then what will be the final career that I will be landing into. So means that confusion and that need to be erased, and there has to be clarity. Probably NSDC or NASSCOM can further help in this, so that the students and the learners, they know that what they need to do. And another is that means there are many good things that we should have a platform. But I think means from our experience, we have a pedagogy called student on the shop floor that we used to do in mechanical engineering. But now, unless the students are there and they are doing like internships or hackathons, and they don't go hands-on with other team members, so that's the way they learn. So I remember one of the feedback by our interns who came in the campus for 1 month. He said that this was my transformational month in my whole life. So that is the kind of thing the students are looking into, that brings the kind of environment and the ecosystem. Another thing is that if we just give some workshops and leave it there, then in the long term, it doesn't help. So there has to be something called continuity upgrades. So the students has to be enrolled with you for a long time so that it keeps in touch and keeps on following up with small upgrades to the curriculum that he has already done. Because even I remember that when we were working on some technology, then immediately there was something called BERT, so which changed entirely the accuracy levels and everything. And once we are done with that, something else called GPT-3 came and again kind of transformed everything. So similarly, reinforcement learning is now coming in a big way, and it is transforming the supervised learning that we used to do previously. So many times means even if they have learned some course or workshop with any organization 6 months back, so it is essential that they also track the happenings in the field because it is transforming very fast. So another requirement that maybe Government of India and other organizations need to look into is the low level entry requirements, because many students they are not able to take the high cost courses which are being run by the market forces now. And another is that many of them are kind of, they think that a lot of mathematics background is required or a lot of other prerequisites are required. So like Partha was saying, if we have to train students in journalism, in marketing, in business, and in other social sciences, I don't think they will be having any background in mathematics especially. So we need to kind of create some courses and create some pathways where they have other allied avenues related to AI, which is not core professional technical course. And they also need to understand that not too many resources are required initially, because what we have done is mostly use the Google Colabs or NVIDIA virtual labs, or we have our own supercomputing facility which they were using remotely. So from the learner side, initially at least, means they don't require any hi-fi resource requirement. So that means can be done. So that need to be made clear. So we have specifically means experience in creating the academic ecosystem. So how we have done is that, again, in any academia or in any other professional organization, they need to create some specialized degree or certificate courses, which already many of them have already done. And they need to kind of wrap it in a research ecosystem also. So what we did, which is kind of happened very good for us, is research groups we created in 100 organizations for 5 people each. So who were given some research problems. So they were kind of trainers, but that kept them on their toes to understand the technology and also to drive the workshops and the student learning. Because unless they are not involved in the core research, which can involve responsible AI, which can involve explainability of AI, which involves data bias, which involves moral issues of AI, legal issues of AI, ethical issues of AI, business and customer context of AI, adoption challenges specifically, as well as the resource and the resource hungry aspect of AI. Means if you want to run the same model in a mobile, which will be the real device where the final AI applications will run. So students and the learners need to understand that everything will not run on supercomputers. So everything will eventually run on mobile devices. So these particular research issues need to be part of that ecosystem. Otherwise, the students end up only just developing some basic models, which does not help industry and doesn't help even in their career pathway. So that is very important. So what we did was we created a collaboration with AI startups. So we had a marquee event where Mr. Amitabh Kant was also there, and we had around 50 AI startups across the country. So who were present, that how to participate in this process. So they themselves were also looking for some mentors in research, because they get so much involved in their customer acquisition, in their product development. They can't keep track of what the research is happening. And in some cases, the algorithms they have used are so old that even just if they change the API or change the algorithm, they can kind of significantly increase their accuracy levels. So they were also kind of happy to participate in this process, because that gives them a backward feedback that where they stand in terms of technology. So this whole ecosystem, which everybody is kind of recommending, is very good approach, but it requires a lot of hard work so that every component of that ecosystem is actually live. It is not a dummy kind of component. Means in some institution, when we say industry connect or corporate connect, it shows just on paper or some CXO giving a talk or something. So that will not help. There has to be some real data sets which needs to be shared with the institutions. There has to be some real mini projects which needs to be worked in collaboration with all these ecosystem partners. So I think these are very important points. So thank you very much, Kirti.
No, thank you for that. And the point that you bring out on, it's okay to do these things in pockets, but if we have to do it at scale, we have to think about how to guide people on what is the right way to start. Does it have to be technical? How do we bring AI to non-technical people? About hands-on, I think hands-on is something all of you have mentioned, that it's not just, now in this world, technology is not about just being able to learn something theoretically. And that therein, I think, lies the challenge on where do you get the labs from, where do you provide the internships, how do you create the genuine industry connects and the startup connects. So I think lovely points. One thing that you touched upon, and I'd like to come back to Rohini with that question on, and I think we talked about it in our earlier conversation before this panel, which was on the whole ethics around AI. And I know the Prime Minister also in his opening address for this conference talked about weaponization of AI. I mean, he used a very strong word, but at some level, given that AI is influencing the way we think, what does this mean from an education point of view? What do we need to bring in, and how do we need to address this?
I think the topic of ethics or responsibility in AI is a fairly nuanced topic, and clearly the thinking that as an organization we have been putting into it for the last 4+ years, starting with I think a blog that Satya had written in 2016. where we were looking at how technology is progressing and where we see challenges happening, and in a sense that allowed us to also think about, are there a set of core principles that we want to look at as a mirror as we go forward in this technology area, and that should make us pause and think about, are these principles the ones that we will consider, and Laura spoke a little bit about them, fairness, inclusion, safety, reliability, security, privacy, accountability, and transparency. Now, the question is that, to have these come alive for every stakeholder is not that easy because they are pretty nuanced. And what happens is that clearly at the level of companies, at the board level, at the senior leadership level, their nuanced understanding of how they want to translate these principles of ethics and responsibility into the context of their business, and how they want to imbibe them, and as well as put in place processes, structures, tools and techniques and governance mechanisms to really make them come alive is a different conversation. But now if you bring it down to a developer level, right, which is a very different mindset, there you are in the middle of developing a product, and it's not possible for you to think about all of these principles all the time. Therefore, what we have done is taken many of these responsible AI topics and converted them into guidelines and checklists and tools which are available on GitHub that people can use, for example, to check for whether their data has hidden biases, for example, whether the model has there are explainable AI models and techniques which are out there. So then that has to come alive in the context of developers. Now, if you think of from a consumer perspective, right, completely different stakeholder, or even a student perspective, I think the need for people to understand that AI at the end of it is our algorithms, that the fact that there is a techniques behind it, there are assumptions behind it, that awareness, even at a base level, is required across the board. And when we talk about, and Shweta talked about, Deepak talked about it, that even as we go and discuss AI with even school students, the awareness that these are algorithms and how they work and what are issues to be thought about, that awareness level has to be there, but it may not be at the level of governance and tools and techniques. So therefore the topic is broad, and everybody needs to be every stakeholder is a part of it, but the context and the detail and the substance of it varies along with the stakeholders. I mean, if I look at strategy and culture, then every culture, if an organization is thinking about data, then their ability to think about data and think about, am I making sure that my decision making is transparent? It really becomes part of how an organization is run. So it really has a nuanced approach across every stakeholder.
I think that's really well put, and I had never thought of it that way, but it makes sense now. But I want to just extend that thought into when we talk about it has to be created at a base level. Take something as simple as what is right and what is wrong. I mean, just the idea of what is right and wrong. It's something that builds up either inside your family or builds up inside schools or when you're a small kid. So coming up to AI for kids, I mean, is there a case, and I'd like Shweta and Professor Partha to take this question, to say when we talk about school children, is there a case to build up awareness about AI at that age so that when they get into maturity or careers or decisions about how they're going to, whatever domain they choose, whatever discipline they choose, that they are prepared to think through these issues, or at least think about a way of thinking. I think Seema mentioned it in her opening address of how we need to completely think differently in this age of AI. So Shweta, if you could take that first.
Sure. Thanks, Kirti. So yes, there is. In fact, not many of us are aware of it, but India is the first country globally to actually introduce AI as a subject of study. So like a child would opt for a biology or a physics or a chemistry in school as part of their curriculum, they can also opt for artificial intelligence today. And the first grade 10th board exams in artificial intelligence are going to happen in 2021. And now other countries are emulating that. They're learning from it and emulating this entire movement which has happened on AI in schools. Let me put it that way, that youth today are extremely active. They know what is happening around them. They understand their concerns. They understand AI ethical concerns. They understand AI biases. And they're talking about it because they possibly read about it. They are facing it much more than any of us who are not that comfortable with social media because they are living social media day in and day out. So yes, there is certainly a possibility. Now, how do we really help them learn or help them in their learning journey is something where all of us will have to come together and do that. Help them to understand the pitfalls and the advantages, and then navigate their ways to become AI ready in the true sense.
Thanks. Partha?
When we learned computers, when we were children, we got a diagram of a computer. That here is a CPU, here is a memory, here is this. When we teach anybody AI, we try to give them an image of magic. And that is the first wrong thing that we do when we try to teach AI. Therefore, in order to do that, we really have to tell people what is AI. And we have to draw that diagram for AI. Otherwise, people will think AI is magic, or people will think AI is human being. And why is that different? Because AI brings new unsolvable problems in decision making that did not exist before, even legally. For example, we all know that if an autonomous car is driving, then if it has a choice of which person will die, then it's an unsolvable problem. But when we are driving cars, when something happens, we are not at fault. But if an AI takes such a decision, later on, we will try to find the fault in AI. So let me tell you what this very nuanced thing which has been mentioned by Rohini and Shweta is very important. AI brings in a new mathematical, legal dimension which is agnostic. Human beings are brought up in various ways. On the other hand, we are training AI systems which are not agnostic, and we want them to behave agnostically. This is a new unsolvable dimension. And unless we are able to explain and understand this dimension, so in my opinion, it is very important to not give very, very funny notions of AI to children. And that needs to be done very deeply and thought very deeply. It is only then people will know what responsibility is, what ethics is. Because there will be people who will use it irresponsibly as a weapon or whatever it is. So AI is also like a drug. You can create a drug and you can, so now drugs, in order to validate drugs, it goes through trials. And for every trial, there is a sequence. And then when it is used, there is a trail which has to be fed back. So unless we bring all these things into AI, we will really not be doing responsible AI. But in my opinion, the first thing is draw a diagram of an AI. Don't draw a human being diagram of an AI.
That's really interesting the way you put it. And there was, in fact, Niti Aayog has created this module, AI module for school children, and it does not have a diagram of AI as a human being, and nor does it have a diagram of this, this monster that is sitting out there. I think they beautifully integrated the whole idea of artificial intelligence with actual intelligence and how you think and how AI thinks. If you haven't seen that, it's freely available on the Niti Aayog website. So I would really encourage you all to take a look. The industry actually got together and contributed a lot of content along with, I think, IIT Mumbai was the one which designed the pedagogy. Very well done. So take a look at that. I think you'll be pleased, Partha. It's not creating all kinds of myths. So I'm going to actually now stop here because I think we just want to leave a little bit of time for some questions. Unless the panelists have any closing remarks of their own, in which case I will pass, after which I will pass it on to Seema if there are any questions.
I was going to add, if I may, Professor Partha's last comment. Even the logo we use for AI potentially should be rethought, because it tends to have this, superhuman kind of a very weird thing, right? And it really needs to come alive. At the end of it, it has got data and algorithms and mathematics behind it, and so really one has to open the hood. So I really appreciate those last comments, Professor.
Yes, I think dots and dashes is better than Android. That the robots that are being represented by. Excellent, well said. I thought this was an amazing conversation, and I would love to carry on with this at some other time. But Seema, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I think it was amazing, and I'm sure the audience also would have absolutely lapped up whatever everybody's been saying, and it was wonderful. I just remembered a saying while you all were talking about. I think President Roosevelt said that you can't create a future for the youth, but you can create the youth for the future. So it's very reassuring to see that our industry and our academy are doing such brilliant work. From a government perspective, I mean, I can be rest assured that we are going to be doing the right things at the right time, since all of you mentioned a lot of tie-ups with Niti Aayog and Ministry of Education. And so I guess the government is also doing a brilliant job in aligning the thoughts in the right direction. So yeah, there are a couple of questions from the audience, and I can take up a few. And one which really it's a very basic level question, is that you all have been talking about students. Students have come up as a point of conversation multiple times. What is your take? I mean, you all are senior management. I think from a government perspective, I'm senior management. What is your take on the middle management? Is AI going to be making the middle management redundant? And how good are they at upscaling themselves? I mean, what is your experience from an industry perspective? Because you're training the lower end of the spectrum. The upper end I can see is very well trained, because you all are speaking so eloquently and you know exactly what you're doing. So where does the middle layer go? Who would like to take that?
I can take initial crack at it, if you don't mind.
Okay, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I think, maybe we in our talk track we ended up speaking a lot about sort of lower, for lack of a better word,
yes,
early in career people, right? We talk, but actually I think that's probably misleading, because at the end of the day, any AI systems, products which have to work systemically, a system of systems at an organization level or at society level, at a government level, really has to be not just a technical, it has to work across boundaries. And I think for people who are maybe 10, 15 years into career or whatever, they need to think about, maybe even if they're not today doing like developmental work, but they need to think about what AI is capable of. Because at the end of the day, it's almost becoming an API kind of economy. Because a lot of the work that the platform providers are providing you AI for consumption, pretty much, right? So you can take building blocks and create systems. That can only happen if you understand problems end to end. And that is the domain knowledge, whether it is functional or industry vertical wise, that managers learn as they grow older. The second part about, the second comment I would make is that as AI becomes bigger and bigger part of augmenting our workforce, the need for managers, etc., to develop their soft skills, to develop their human empathy skills, to really be that augmented, wherein you are not just doing tasks, but you are adding value through creativity, through collaboration, through really having that nonlinear thinking. I think some of those skills will become important, and those are the skills one needs to develop to understand systems thinking, connecting the dots, creativity, empathy. And even if you want to stay completely technical, it is actually about taking building blocks and creating systems. So to me, there is actually a role across the board, whether you're a creator of AI or an augmenter of AI or a user of AI.
So the middle management is safe. They're not going to be laid off. They're definitely not being laid off.
None of us get to escape the constant learning.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But the point that I would add to that is that when you talk about the leadership of especially of the IT companies, everybody is really committed to reskilling and investing in upgrading their workforce. But when you think about how middle management, because that's the middle, that's actually the heart of an organization. Middle management is the heart. They're the guys.
That's what I would like to believe, yes.
Yes, but how much do they proactively go and upskill themselves is actually the data is not very encouraging for the moment. So one of the purposes, I think, of conversations like this is to send the message out there that you have to take responsibility. I think Laura also ended her conversation, her presentation by saying that you've got to take responsibility and develop yourself, because nobody's going to come and inject you with this anymore. That ship has sailed. You have to pick up with both hands and upgrade yourself.
Yeah, the accountability and responsibility rests with each individual. So that is, I think, a point, that message that loudly needs to go out. And how closely linked, I mean, when you talk about the term artificial intelligence, you've all been talking about taking artificial intelligence to the non-tech, the people who are not technical enough. So what is your correlation of an IQ of a person? I think Professor Partha can take that better, being from an academia background. How closely is the IQ linked to a person's grasp on the concept of AI? I mean, IQ could be technical, could be non-technical. It's primarily an IQ. So how closely linked is that? Any stats on that?
You know what, we have done some experiments with high IQ people. So I do experiments to understand the difference of how AI affects human beings. So, you do a lot of experiments with these eye trackers and responses, response times, etc., etc. IQ is a very important factor. The most important factor, even IQ, I think native intelligence is number one. Native intelligence is the most important factor of how back you can go and restart and start thinking. The second thing is how much you can connect with whatever you have done. And the more broader you are in your other activities, the better you start getting hold of AI. If you are narrow, if you know only very little of certain things, then you will find it very, very difficult to get into AI. But if you are a voracious reader while being a mathematician, or you have, in IIT, we now call something called your second discipline, which is completely non-technical, because that affects both sides of the brain. So what we have found is AI is most effective for people who make both sides of the brain work effectively.
Okay. Makes sense. So at the end of the day, you have to be intelligent. So to grasp the concept of artificial intelligence.
No, even a shopkeeper is intelligent, because they survive
native
daily.
Intelligence, yes.
They survive daily. So that is very important.
The native intelligence upbeats everything. I mean, common sense is much more important and factor for survival than whatever you've learned as knowledge.
Because if you don't have common sense, you will lose your sense and you'll test positive for COVID.
Yes, but unfortunately, common sense is not very common. So that's a very rare find. So that generally happens. There's another one question from the audience. Let me read it out to you. It precisely says that India hosts millions of fresh STEM graduates each year. However, India, meanwhile, has a dearth of talent in AI. How can we upskill this foundation of STEM graduates to meet the requirements of our AI workforce? Who would like to take this?
I won't answer it, but there's one data point I just read yesterday, was the day before yesterday, where there was a chart on where does all the AI skilled workforce in the US come from. 36% was locally educated in the US, 38% came from India and China. So there is something that we are doing that is then getting exported, something we are doing right, but for ourselves and keeping them here and keeping them inspired is something we probably need to do a little better job of. But I think over to the panel because I have lots of views on this, but I'd rather defer to them.
Which is very tragic that we're losing such brilliant workforce outside, but that's a separate conversation. I mean, that's been highlighted up to a number of times. Would anybody like to add to what Kirti said, or then we can just move on?
I can just make a quick comment to this. That there is a huge upsurge of emerging markets like India and Indonesia, Philippines. What is happening is back-end data labeling jobs are coming more to us than the actual AI jobs, which in typical terms one would call as ghost jobs in the artificial intelligence world. So that's a concern which is happening, and upskilling is the most important imperative for the current workforce. Also for people who graduated as with STEM as their nature of discipline to move. And there are plenty of avenues available. So the idea or the only recommendation I would have is not to get stuck in that ghost AI job situation where all they're doing is back-end data labeling, but really try and pick up skills which would enable them to become value-added workers to the AI foray. And it doesn't have to mean that everybody has to become a developer or everybody has to sit and write algorithms. I mean, we know a lot of other allied jobs with AI, which comes as an option, a field available to all graduates in STEM.
So it's wonderful. So it's an option available to both, which is, I think, the message that I mean, the audience who's connected would be very interested to hear. So it's wonderful. So I think we will stop here. And I would just like to congratulate the speakers. I mean, it was absolutely amazing. And I want to be I'm thankful to Kirti for doing a splendid job of moderating it. And I think we are bang on time, not a minute here or a minute there. So it was brilliantly handled and very well spoken and very well taken care of. So thank you all panelists, and we're really grateful on behalf of RAISE 2020 for being here with us and connected with us. So moving forward with this, we come to an end of the panel discussion and we go to the last segment of our event, which is a talk by Sandeep. So I would like to introduce Sandeep to the session. Okay, so just a second. We have Mr. Sandeep Alur. He's the Director, Microsoft Technology Center. He has extensive experience of working with independent software vendors and startups in India, and is an aspiring data scientist and loves technologies that have a profound impact in human lives. So obviously AI has a soft spot with him. So Sandeep, over to you for your thoughts and ideas.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Seema. Appreciate your introduction. By the way, I must admit before I get started, last 1 hour has been a true masterclass for me as I heard all the panelists. It's truly was an insightful conversation, very meaningful, very relevant. I would say it's very close to reality in terms of what we heard. So thanks to everyone for sharing the perspective. I'll share my screen just if you can confirm once you see it, and then I'll get started, Seema. Just bear with me. I think a lot of it's been a perfect backdrop to my session. So I must thank all the panelists for that. I'm going to just share it. And Seema, once you see my screen, if you can confirm, that will help.
Yes, I can. I'm sure.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. In fact, I made a few notes while I was listening to all the panelists. So I will reflect on some of the statements being made by a panelist as part of my talk. Very relevant in that context. But for the next 30 minutes, I'll spend share my thoughts and perspectives on AI and its impact on society. I think enough has been said about the need of the hour is for each of us to wear the responsibility I had. I think the need of that is actually for each of us to be guardians of implications of AI, guardians of AI. In fact, even our Prime Minister made a statement saying, right, it calls for responsible AI to make a global impact in India to be a global hub when it comes to innovation, comes to AI. But yeah, I want to reflect back on one thought. There was, by the way, during as part of my talk, I'll share a few stories for each of the tenets. We call it design principles when it comes to building AI, and also use case specific talk is what I would probably focus on today, so that makes it very real for the listeners. Now, 2 years back, I think a year and a half back, I know there was a town hall at Microsoft, and Rohini, who was in the panel today, there was a question asked by her saying, hey, 2 years down the line, will we still be speaking about AI in the same intensity and capacity? And most of us felt, yes, we would be, but her perspective was profound. She said, mostly it will get subsumed into everything that we do going forward. That's so real. I mean, that means we may not speak in the same capacity, but the education with each of us needs to exist to ensure that we understand the implication, understand how we use AI and how responsible we should be going forward. It may not be called out that this system has intelligence. No, it's understood that systems that we're going to build going forward will have intelligence, right? That's a construct there. By the way, at Microsoft, I work at Microsoft Technology Center, as Seema mentioned. The best part of my job is I get to interact with one customer each day. And trust me on this one, no conversation goes without we speaking about AI. And bulk of my energy goes into educating our customers, partners on the fact that the responsible AI should be a core tenet of the organization. that should become part of the manifest as they look at building systems. It's not an after fact. It's not a tick mark end of the day. It should be a mainstream activity that they undertake as they think about ideating on a use case, think about collecting data for a use case, and think about building the model for that particular use case. So responsible AI as a hat is something each of us should wear, each developer, either upper management, middle management, or a foot soldier. I call the people actually doing work as foot soldiers. Everyone should wear that hat. Now, two thematics. I think a few of the panelists mentioned this aspect of automation, right? I know when the panel discussion was happening, I know Deepak mentioned about reinforcement learning, GPT-3, etc. But if you look at two thematics in the industry, yes, there automation seems to be the foundation for how systems will evolve going forward, right? Intelligent automation, which dominantly is termed as robotic process automation and AI coming together, and autonomous systems, of course, where we're talking about no human in the loop, right? Where systems complement human ingenuity and look at how they can take up tasks where it's not practical for an individual to be present there and physically take up the task. So these are the two thematics I want to probably present as a backdrop to bulk of my talk today. And the important aspect here is automation, right? That means we're looking at how can systems complement human productivity. In that context, how can systems be responsible enough to ensure that nothing untoward happens? That's where bulk of energy needs to come together and look at how AI as a technology will, of course, have a profound impact on society, but how do we ensure that it's done in the most safest, secure manner? I think that's something which is very relevant. Now, just to clarify, when I said autonomous systems, look at it this way: we have robots for a long time. In fact, robotics as a topic has been there for decades. But we're talking also about a controlled environment where systems do things based instructions been given to them. If there is 10 steps involved in assembling a car, right? So these robotic hands, they do the job brilliantly. It's repetitive tasks, right? It's process intensive, human intensive. So they do it really well. But what if there are external environmental changes coming into the picture? Will those robotic hands, will they act differently, right? If you look at a manufacturing plant, no, they would not. They would probably cease to operate because external intervention is actually harming the way it is assembling the car. Now, this is where autonomous systems comes into play. Depending on external, I would say environment intervention, how can systems understand the implications of an external intervention and act responsibly, right? Act aptly in terms of, or rather take decisions which suits the current situation basis external entity intervention. I think that's where autonomous systems is making news. That's where autonomous systems will supremely complement human ingenuity going forward, right? Now it can be honestly, if you look at an anti-braking system in a car, ABS we call it. So that's classic evidence of depending on how one applies a brake and depending on the surface on the road, it takes apt decision not to ensure the car sways too much. Same is true with drones, right? When you fly drones, you worry less about the trajectory or the speed at which the fans are rotating. We focus more on capturing the visual that the drone is actually showcasing at certain height, right? And also, if you look at smart building today, yes, depending on the temperature outside, depending on external factors, depending on some of the predictive powers of technology in terms of what may happen in the next couple of hours, you take decisions for energy consumption, right? So these are a few examples, but let me just switch gears and talk about, yes, when it comes to AI's impact, it is across domains, it is across industries, and again, there is human in the loop and no human in the loop as well. But doesn't matter, irrespective of the situation, how can we ensure AI, when in its true sense, complements human ingenuity as well as take responsible facet of it and derive that impact. Now, quick one, right? So now, if you look at autonomous vehicles, we kind of, I think Professor mentioned it earlier. there is a need for us to, if you look at the way systems are built today, yes, you depend on historical data, and machines learn from historical data, and it gains that predictive power. Another variant which Pawan mentioned was about reinforcement learning. Again, reward system driven. You look at what is happening at that point in time, and basis, I would probably call it as a human intuition being part of the system there. It takes certain actions, right? Irrespective of the situation, the need for us to look at implications and also ensure there is safety net being baked in. That's super essential as we go along. Now, if you look at GPT-3 as an example, we use the term called artificial general intelligence, AGI. There's one classic evidence where this innovation pretty much has the power to create fiction, right? Given an author's name, given the vocabulary of that particular author, creative fiction is something which it churns out, right? So this is probably 30, 40 years down the line, this may be a reality, is what we hear from scientists in terms of the true power of artificial intelligence. But today, it is definitely dependent on the world that we represent, right? I recall one of our customers indicating in one of the forums saying, you know what, we have in our company, we have 1,200 employees and 25 digital workers, right? I mean, this is where the autonomy is coming into the picture. We talk about digital workers, they're all basically human avatars. In fact, when Professor mentioned AI should probably have an avatar as an image of it, yes, these digital workers are represent the digital world, and they complement the human productivity immensely. So this is the world we're stepping into, where most of the current times where you're looking at automation to happen, and this is also a time you'll think about digital workforce in a significant way, not to replace human force, but to complement human workforce, right? So with that, just stepping onto the core topic, which is the impact of AI on society, as well as how do we ensure you design systems with utmost trust, transparency, accountability, aspect, which was spoken by panelists earlier as well. Then these becomes a core tenet. But end of the day, I think Kirti mentioned this. It is not about the technical workforce understanding the implications or the power of it. It is about every citizen should understand how AI will have an impact, right? The intelligence part of it, it is something which is not rule based. It is not programmed to behave in a certain fashion. Depending on the users' expectations, systems morph themselves into what it can be valuable asset for the end user. I think that's how the systems are looked at going forward. Now, the point is, when it comes to designing systems, yes, there are multiple aspects to it, but at the highest level, there's a need for one to understand that, yes, system can be built for various reasons, and those reasons should have a positive impact on society, and that shouldn't be used in any other negative construct. I think that's probably been the talk of the town in the current times, where AI has reached human parity, and that means AI has the power to mimic missions, mimic human intelligence, and hence there's a need for us to safeguard that by regulations coming into the picture, and safeguard individuals' privacy. And quote a few examples as we go along to pretty much exemplify what that would be on the ground as we go along. So at Microsoft, yes, Laura mentioned this. We released our guiding principles when it comes to responsible AI, and the 6, I would say, design principles you see at the bottom: fairness, reliability, inclusiveness, privacy, transparency, and accountability. These are the design principles behind any system, right, that we build going forward. And I'm going to take each one of them with and quote specific example. Some are Indian examples, some are global examples, but these are true examples in terms of how. These are true evidences, by the way, in terms of how systems were expected to react, and what happened on the ground, and how it could have been negative, right? So the reason I'm going to go with this flow is just to make sure that these 6 design principles, design guidelines, is what should become part of your enterprise manifest. That means as you have data science teams, even as a student, if you're building a machine learning model, you got to make sure you verify your the model's accuracy or efficacy, if you can call it, under the realm of these 6 principles, right? Because when you put that model into production, the implication is something which has to be tested, which has to be assessed, which has to be looked up in terms of what will be the impact if it goes either ways, right? That's very important. Doesn't matter, it can be a simple model, but still these 6 principles are very profound in that context. Let's look at the first one, fairness, right? We talk about systems being built and systems showing some kind of a bias, right? That's a common term that we use, saying systems should not have any bias towards any specific gender in this. As an example, if you can quote here, if you look at, let's say you're building a system and the result of using the system has an impact on individuals for sure as consumers, but it shouldn't favor any specific segment in the society or not favor specific segment of people in the society. That's an outright bias baked in. As Microsoft, we were working with one of the lending companies in North America, right? And this lending company, they basically has a history of working with startups, right? And it's, startups basically seeking the initial capital for running the company. Now, system was also built to complement, rather the automation was trying to, automation was the need of the hour, and that's what the company built to ensure that can we build a model which will actually help people who are eventually deciding on whether loan should be given to this person or not. Can we go with a scientific approach towards being very accurate, looking at market strategy, looking at market statistics, looking at the current fund that we have, those aspects, right? But when the system was put into production, by the way, it was put into a trial alongside the human chain in terms of how they were approving loans. Now, the system was actually recommending, saying, hey, this is high risk, low risk category in terms of should you lend the loan or yes or no. But when the team reflected on the results that were being called out by the system, which is the machine learning model, which was built, it was very evident after about 120 to 200 trials that it was favoring companies where the CEO was a male, right? So there was a gender bias right in, and they went back and looked at historical data. Historical data was reflective, as they assessed that yes, in the past, in the last 10 years, majority of the loans that were approved for startups, those startups had male CEOs, right? Now, the same bias which was there as part of the human decisions being made were baked into the model as well, because the model was built looking at historical data. And again, by the way, because there was an intervention there to assess, because the trial run, it was fixed to ensure there was no bias when it comes to deciding should loan be given to the startup or not, right? I think this is one classic example where each of us have to ensure, as we build systems, doesn't matter if you're a student or a professional developer or a senior executive in a company, when you're building systems, making sure there is no bias of any means. Now I quote an example of a gender bias, but even otherwise, bias of any means shouldn't exist in the system. Is not easy to achieve. That's where tools and techniques have come into picture to ensure, some of the dominant features which may have a bias, if those features are used as part of the model development life cycle, as part of feature engineering you do, right? So those are the, I would say, checks that one has to do relentlessly as the model gets built. It's of no use being reflective on the model's output and then going back and fixing. Of course, the world of machine learning revolves on iterations, but doesn't mean that you do it aftermath. No, as part of your life cycle, you have to ensure there is no bias in it. Again, as I said, it's very, it's an ideal world, where data is absolutely intact, the single version of truth that is practical, but otherwise it's very difficult to achieve. But bulk of the effort has to be made to ensure that that doesn't happen. Reliability and safety. This is definitely an area which in my view, when it used across industries, has a significant impact on the society. Just to quote an example, right? This is again, we work with one of the mining companies in Middle East, where the need of the hour was to keep an eye on the operator who uses his heavy machinery, right? Making sure that this person is not demonstrating any fatigue there is no issue. There's nothing. This person attentive. That was the assessment that one is to make, right? So there was a computer vision being used, to ensure that as this person operates this massive machinery, he or she is attendant, right? So making sure the systems will actually help certain use cases where reliability and safety needs to be ensured is something which is very, very, an important task here. Now, again, if the person is not attentive as he or she operates the mission, now what should happen? I think that's something which is probably the most important thing that the system should reflect on, right? If that person is feeling drowsy for some reason as they're operating the mission, it's a massive machinery wherein there may be about thousands of people working that plant. Will that have a negative impact? And that's why system should actually, foresee some of the negative implications of this person not being attentive. That's something which system should also, forecast, predict, and prescribe. That's one example where when you're building a system, yes, look for anomalies in the system, look for certain untoward incident that may happen because of which your systems should not be behaving in a similar fashion that it would have been otherwise, right? That's very critical element in terms of how one should look at reliability and safety. Privacy and security. This is again a classic example I want to quote here. This is to ensure that when systems, when consumers interact with systems, how are we ensuring that their privacy is maintained, data of individuals secure, right? As Microsoft, this is the early experiment, by the way. There's a chit chat bot called Tay, right? I'm sure most of you would have heard. This chit chat bot was built as a conversation agent to learn conversation capability by looking at tweets, right? And it was doing well for a few hours, and later realized that it was used. The chit chat bot was fed with a lot of negative construct, a lot of rhetoric, bigotry, whatever you call it, right? So all the stuff was fed into the chatbot, and the chatbot actually became, a digital agent who did hate speech, right? So when we build systems, how do we ensure we safeguard against people misusing the system, or rather feeding data which probably is not in the interest of the eventual outcome from the system is super, super important, right? Now, this chatbot was eventually pulled out in 24 hours because it turned out to be negative in terms of its usage, right? Again, it was built to make sure the system does a very meaningful conversation, but it was also accepting information as the chatbot knew the art of speech. So this is one other reason why, when it comes to machine learning models, when it comes to any model which will have direct impact on the consumers. The consumer can be anybody, by the way. It need not be an eventual consumer who doesn't have technology, but anybody who interacts with the system to ensure the privacy of the individual is maintained as well as data is secure, right? That's probably when I said earlier, you got to make sure these checks and balances needs to be part of your mainstream manifest. This probably takes center stage in terms of making sure data privacy is maintained, and it is also, it resists attacks, right? How do we ensure this secure? Now, information being shared to one person shouldn't be made available or should be used to take decisions for other person, right? So those are important tenets there. Now, before I move on to the next one, I want to probably set the context. We're talking about accessibility here, right? Now, if you look at, we talk about inclusive systems, right? We're talking about systems not to have bias. Systems should safeguard private security, but we also talk about a system should be inclusive. Now, inclusivity, has a definitely a bigger construct. But before I speak about that, I have an example to quote. But I want to establish this fact that when you talk about disability, generally, I'm talking about disability globally. We have, by the way, that disability is not a health condition, right? We talk disability being synonymous to mismatched human interaction. I mean, it is not about it. It involves permanent disability, and it also includes temporary disability, right? But it is purely about mismatched human interaction when it comes to people being a digital world, ability for them to have a conversation, interact with the systems, and make their work done. Now, talk about inclusiveness. Yes, this is one aspect which also has a thin line between bias and inclusiveness here, right? Imagine if a system favors, excludes one section of the crowd when it comes to making decisions. That means it's being not inclusive. There's a bias towards one type of, I would say, cohort or end users. Now, inclusiveness is again when it comes to your target user base. Now, this is one example. We work with Australian Department of Human Services, DHS. Now, this is again, there was a need to introduce, or rather, bring in technology to complement the massive load of, I would say, call center, call this together the call center in terms of overall human services. The system, there was certain tests done to understand what is the load, what kind of users are making a call, etc. But it is also realized down the line that there's a large section of people are excluded from this entire human services because they just can't make a telephone call. The best way for them to get a service is to physically be present, right? Imagine a situation where you're trying to bring in technology to optimize your call center operations, making sure that can we ensure the human agents are not stressed? Can machines take over some of the conversations with the end users and optimize operations? But in that exercise, what was realized by the people studying this overall, I would say, operating life cycle was that a large section of people who have some kind of disability, be it temporary or permanent, they were excluded from this overall chain of call center. Now that's where a multimodal, multi-channel chatbot was included to make sure you bring in every citizen into the loop when it comes to providing human services. This is a classic example, classic manifestation of inclusiveness being central to when we build systems, right? Now, it's probably a very difficult one to make sure that we have profiled every kind of user who use a system are considered. But then, as I said earlier in my statement, operating in the world of AI, it's all about iteration. It's all about reflecting. It's all about the feedback loop. Laura had a slide initially where she actually put a digital feedback loop as a construct when it comes to building product, optimizing operations, empowering employees and consumers, right? So in that context, yes, it's probably a classic foundation to how systems are built going forward, and the feedback loop is very critical. Systems learn with more data, systems learn over a period of time, and this is one area where inclusiveness needs to mature, evolve as system also matures. This is one example. This is again an Indian example. This is for one of the hospitals in India. This is again Microsoft and Apollo hospitals got together and built a cardiovascular disease risk score for the country. This is one one classic example of how AI has a very profound positive impact on the society. This cardiovascular risk score is used by doctors and clinicians to basically predict after a clinical trial that this person will have an episode in the near future or not of cardiovascular. Now, by the way, you can systems always give results, right? Basically saying yes, this person will have an episode in the near future or the far future, and these are the suggested lifestyle changes, right? We're actually talking about proactive wellness here. Now, how should one believe those results, right? There has to be some way for the system to proclaim that yes, this is the backdrop against which I have decided, I'm predicting that this person who underwent trial just now, or this person will have an episode in the next 6 months. Now, this is where the question of explainable AI comes into the picture. I think Pawan mentioned that as part of his talk. Now, model explainability becomes so critical when it comes to each of us believing the outcome as we see from the systems, right? So here, for the doctor, a simple UI was built where the historical view as well as what is optimal score, what is the high risk score, all the stuff are explained in clear terms. That way, doctors could make an able decision on their intuition experience versus what system is saying. They could balance it out and probably give a better decision. So this is one area comes to transparency. Accountability, this is, again, in my view, tops the chart because we're talking about computer vision, probably much ahead of any other innovation today in terms of ability for cameras to look at objects, look at sceneries, look at individuals, identify individuals. Right now, this is one area where systems have to stay accountable. Somebody said that as part of the panel that, hey, today, individuals take accountability on some of the actions being taken. Tomorrow, systems are making a decision. So all of us will put an onus on the system in terms of the decisions being made. That's true, right? So how can systems stay accountable? Now, when it comes to facial recognition, right? Today we see cameras all over, CCTV cameras, and we also see a board which says you are under surveillance. That means people can watch us as we navigate, let's say real estate, let's say a mall for that matter, shopping mall. As we're going through, people, there is a control room where they're seeing, everybody is at watch. Now, when you bring in intelligence there, that means, there is when surveillance happens, yes, systems can detect people, detect their emotions, look at what they're doing, where are they, all the stuff becomes a breach of privacy. So how do we ensure the privacy is not breached? How do systems stay accountable, make sure that facial recognition regulations, as an example, are aptly undertaken? Now, by the way, look at this example here. This is one of the retail example I want to quote. This is again classic evidence of how we're saying that when it comes to transparency and accountability and making sure there is explainable AI. Now, imagine I've logged into the site.
Sandeep, sorry to interrupt your flow of conversation, but we are really little short of time. So it would shut down in the next 2-3 minutes. So if you could just wrap up, I need to give the closing remarks.
No issues. I think I'm in the last slide itself right now. So we're talking about the fact that each of us have to work towards building a responsible system here. And this is one example of how a retail scenario has been showcased as an example of, yes, for a user, we're talking about why the decision went, why this product was shown. My final talk, yes, final slide here. My apologies for the overrun, but yes, each of us have a responsibility to play here. Each of us should be guardians of AI in terms of its implications. And my simple ask of each one of you is to make sure the responsible AI design principles are part and parcel of each of your journey as student, as professional developers, as executives in the industry. Thank you so much. And Seema, back to you.
Thank you, Sandeep. We need the slides to go away, but okay, great. So can everybody switch on their videos, please, if you don't mind? So So Sandeep, thank you so much. That was a very, very engaging session. And I really liked your take on designing trustworthy AI and the guiding principles, and AI as a tool for extending human potential and complementing the human ingenuity. So it was a very nice session indeed. So just a fun question for you. Terminator series possible? No, that's one of my all-time favorites.
It's possible for sure, but I would call it AGI 30-40 years down the line. Not real today.
Not really today, but you mean our future generations do willing to see the Skynet. They will battle the Skynet. Okay, so I hope not. I hope not. So I think we have already been given the warning sign. We need to end the session, but I think it was, I'm sure all of us would agree, it was absolutely brilliant. And I'm really grateful on behalf of Mighty to all the panelists who could find time and connect with us today and share their views. It was a pleasure meeting all of you. I don't know one of you personally, but I would love to take this conversation further and get to know each one of you personally, because I'm really intrigued with the brilliant minds that you all carry. So I would just like to say one last statement that I hope more power to your kind, because you're all doing a splendid job. And in the spirit of inclusivity, I would like to say more power to our kind. I'm getting into the flow. So it's all of us together. So thank you so much. And it was brilliant. And I don't have adequate words to thank you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.
Thanks so much.